We are honored this morning to have Maddie Bishop, who is going to speak to us this morning. Maddie, for those of you who don't know her, Maddie graduated from El Dorado Adventist School, our local Christian school, and then she went to Pacific Union College where she did her prerequisite requirements for nursing. And this fall she's actually going to be going to Loma Linda University where she's going to complete her nursing degree. This last school year, Maddie spent 10 months in New Zealand, as you heard in the children's story. I have a feeling we're probably going to hear a little bit more about that. But I want to invite Maddie up right now. And Maddie, I'd like to have a prayer with you in the congregation before we start. Shall we pray? Let's bow our heads. Father in heaven, as we come into your presence this morning, what a privilege and honor it is to worship you. And what a privilege it is to listen to the voice of one of our young adults who will share with us her journey and those things that God has placed in her heart this morning. And so I pray that your Holy Spirit would be poured out into Maddie's life very richly, so that we might hear the voice of God speaking through her. Thank you for her dedication to you. Thank you for her commitment to you. Thank you that she is a part of this congregation. We pray that along with Maddie, this congregation would look for opportunities at all times to support our young people. Thank you so much for your presence in this place. In Jesus' name we pray and thank you. Amen.
Amen. Okay, let's see if I can get this to work. Oh no, too fast. Okay, here we go. All right, it is such a blessing to be up here and to be able to share my experience with all of you. I was a student missionary last year in New Zealand, and first I would like to thank some people. In New Zealand I had to step up and I really had to be an adult. And it made me really appreciate my teachers and the adults that were in my life when I was in high school and elementary. Especially my teachers. I know my class was really loud. And after being on a couple school trips with a bunch of teenagers, I apologize for I know I was really loud and I apologize for how loud I was. And then to all the adults that just helped raise me, I just appreciate everything you've done so much, whether you were a coach or you had me in your car or you let me stay at your house. It was really a blessing, and at the time I did appreciate it, but I don't know if I ever voiced it, so I'm voicing that now. So thank you to everyone that helped raise me. I really appreciate it. Also, there are a few people who sent me things while I was in New Zealand. I got a couple care packages and a couple cards. And that really meant the world to me. They always seemed to arrive when I was not having a good day. So if any of you ever sent me anything, I really appreciated that as well. Now just a few more pieces of information before I begin. As I said in the children's story, New Zealand is kind of off the coast of Australia. And it's in the southern hemisphere, so that means the seasons are opposite. Lengthwise, it is about the size of the west coast from the northern border of Washington down to the southern border of California, just to give you an idea. So I worked at Longburn Adventist College. I worked at the boarding school and I was a boarding dean, so I took care of all of the boarding students, specifically the girls. And in the picture, the building that's on the left is the girls' dorm, and the building on the right is part of the school, like the actual school building. So LAC, that's what we call Longburn Adventist College for short, was in Palmerston North. It was a small town on the North Island, and they called high schools there colleges, and then most of the time when they referred to what we call a college, they were referring to university, and they normally would call that uni. They also had year levels, and their year levels were 1 through 13 instead of K through 12, so that was a little bit confusing, and it took me a little bit of time to get used to that. And then at LAC specifically, we had years 7 through 13. And years 7 and 8 are considered intermediate, so kind of like junior high. And then years 9 and 10 are considered juniors, and then 11 through 13 are considered seniors. So there was a little bit of a difference, and I had to get used to that when I was there. LAC House is what they call the boarding portion of the school, and it had a range of students from all over the South Pacific. We had students from Papua New Guinea, we had a girl from Tonga, and then of course we had a bunch of students from all over New Zealand, and they came from a wide range of backgrounds. Some were very well behaved, and others were not very well behaved. But that's actually why I loved it so much, because the school gave these students a chance to feel loved and to have the chance to have a relationship with Christ. They really wanted to love and support students who did not come from a background that provided that. 19, 20, 21. 19 was the age I was when I decided to be a student missionary and was selected to go to New Zealand. 20, the age I was for most of the time I was in New Zealand. 21, the age I turned 5 days before I left. I admit I was pretty young, but I don't let my age get in the way of my plans. 19, 20, 21. 19 hours. The time difference between here and New Zealand when I first arrived. 20 hours. The time difference between here and New Zealand from September through November because of daylight savings. 21 hours. The time difference between here and New Zealand from November through March, when the time changed yet again. I admit time was extremely different and the time differences were really confusing. But I don't let time get in the way of God's plans for me. But like I said, time was a bit confusing. For instance, I skipped July 27th, 2016 completely. I left LAX on July 26th and arrived in Auckland, New Zealand on July 28th. I also lived June 2nd, 2017 twice. I left on June 2nd at 1:30 p.m. from Auckland, New Zealand, and I arrived in LA, California at 6:30 a.m. on June 2nd. That just doesn't seem right. Also being 19, then 20, and finally 21 hours ahead of California was just mind-boggling. Trying to figure out when to Skype my parents and what time it was really confusing. But it was fun celebrating my birthday twice. And watching the world celebrate Christmas, New Year's, and other holidays almost a full day after we did was just a bit strange. And sometimes it was just too much for me to think about. There are many different definitions for time. Mine would be that it's mind-boggling, strange, and doesn't make any sense. But Google offered some better definitions. One example, the indefinite continued progress of existence, an event in the past, present, and future, regarded as a whole. Or simply, an indefinite period. There was another one, though, that I thought went well with my topic. The favorable or appropriate time to do something, the right moment. Ecclesiastes 3 gives us a few examples, and by a few, I mean it tells us how there is a time for everything. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to search and a time to give up. A time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear and a time to mend. A time to be silent and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. What do workers gain from their toil? I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. I know there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all of their toil. This is the gift of God. these verses have had a significant impact on my life these past few years. I've also noticed that a few of my experiences in New Zealand and these verses have paralleled each other, and I'm going to share a few of the times that I experienced in New Zealand. A time to mourn and a time to dance. It was Monday, October 24th, 2016. Myself and another girls' dean had just finished playing volleyball on a Monday night with a staff team. And we did this pretty much every Monday. It was kind of a break from the job. And it was a little different because over the weekend, the staff team that I played on had actually been in a SDA volleyball tournament that they did every year. And we ended up winning the championship mixed division final. And it was really exciting. It was some of the best volleyball I've ever played. I accidentally took out someone in the audience because I was trying to get a ball and they were in the way. But it was just a really fun time and I was really excited. And when we finally won that final game, I felt like I could dance. I had never been happier. And then Monday night, it was separate from the tournament, but we ended up winning that game as well. So I was just really excited. And normally after Monday night volleyball, I would just go take a shower and go to bed and get ready to go because the next morning I was on duty early. So that's what I normally would do, but I had actually gotten a really bad floor burn on my knee from volleyball, and so I needed a Band-Aid, and all the Band-Aids were in the dean's office. And I wanted to talk to the head dean about our volleyball game that night. So I went in there quick just to get the Band-Aid and ended up laughing and chatting with the two other girls' deans. And that is a very rare occurrence because usually all three of the deans are just everywhere because our schedules are so different and there's just so much going on. So it was really rare that all three of us were in there. And so all three of us were laughing and just having a great time. And when I look back, it's very interesting to think about how quickly moments can change. We were sitting in there laughing and one of the girls came to the doorway just crying. And she was complaining of the worst headache she's ever had in her entire life. Our initial thought was, oh, she has a migraine. We asked her if she felt sick or if the lights were hurting her eyes too much. We sat her down, we got a container for her. The girl was slumped over on me, and one of the other girls' deans went to go get a car to take her to the hospital. I kind of zoned out for a minute, and I was just thinking about what had happened that night regarding this situation. And I then realized almost her entire body weight I was holding almost her entire body weight. And so I snapped out of whatever zone I was in, and I started calling her name, and she could barely respond. She was just responding with groans. And it was terrifying seeing how quickly she had deteriorated because it had gone from about full sentences to barely being able to respond verbally in 10 to 15 minutes. Thankfully, the deans were able to get her to the hospital quickly, and that night I actually was able to fall asleep, and I'm not sure how that happened. But the next morning I was on duty, and I got the girls to school, and then I went to find the head dean who had taken the girl to the hospital, and I asked her what was going on. And they said they initially thought that she had an aneurysm. This girl was 16. That's not very normal. She was in a coma, and they were waiting to figure out what was going on. Over the next few days, the doctors figured out it wasn't an aneurysm, but actually a tangle of weak arteries and veins that was inside of her brain, and it had burst, and it had caused a brain bleed. When I look back at that time, it feels like that week was in slow motion. It was emotional because this student was only 4 years younger than me, and I probably would have been in high school with her, and she would have been one of my close friends. At first, comforting the girls was difficult because I just wanted to crawl in my bed and hide. But I had to stand up and I had to be an adult. Thankfully, there were a lot of prayers going up for her, and she ended up coming out of the coma about a week later. She recovered over the summer and was able to go back to school the next school year. That experience was by far one of the most challenging, and I really had to just let go and let God control that situation because there really was not a thing I could do. A time to kill and a time to heal. Picture this. It's 4 a.m., you're sound asleep, and you're on duty in 2 hours. and suddenly on your apartment door, there is wild banging. For me, in that situation, I was in utter panic. I was searching for my glasses, I was looking for the light switch, I was looking for my keys and my shoes, and it really felt like it was a time to kill whoever had just woken me from my sleep. I was really grumpy, and so I go to open the door and just yell at whoever's standing in front of me, and I open the door, and there's one of the other girls, and she's just crying in obvious pain. And it went from being a time to kill to a time to heal instantly. She had an infected fingernail, and the pressure inside of it had gotten so painful that she actually couldn't sleep. And so I got a bowl of hot water and salt, and I took her to the office, and we soaked her finger, and we were able to get rid of some of the pressure, and I gave her some more medication, and she went to sleep, and everything was fine. This situation could have been totally avoided though. She had told one of the other deans 2 or 3 days later that her finger was hurting, and the dean suggested soaking the finger in some salt water, and she didn't. So I said I got to be woken up at 4 a.m. But I'm glad it happened. It really made me realize the responsibility that I had taking care of the girls, and I actually kind of felt like a parent, and I felt bad for the times I'd woken my parents at 4 a.m. But it also made me realize that sometimes it does feel like it's a time to kill, but if we take a step back and we change our perspective, it's actually a time to heal. A time for peace. February and March 2017 were really rough. We had so many situations that were really intense happening over and over and over again. We had multiple cases of substance abuse and cyberbullying. We had a couple students that ended up leaving because of that. It was really emotionally overwhelming seeing them leave because it was something we didn't want to happen. There was really not much time for any rest, and every time I was on duty, I felt and was thinking, what's going to happen next? What could go wrong? And for about 7 weeks, we'd have something happen, and it would go for about a week and a half, and then right as it was getting finished up, we would just be getting over it and something new would happen. So there was just no time to even process what was going on. It got to a point where I was really burnt out, and I thought it would be good to talk to the school counselor. As I was talking with him, I realized I hadn't taken any personal time over the past 7 weeks. I'd had days off, but even on those days off, I was still on campus, I was still around in case something happened. So the counselor suggested that I go and have a day for myself. Don't do anything regarding the school, just relax. So I ended up going to the beach. The beach? There it is. Ended up going to the beach and just spending the day there reading and relaxing. I took a nap, I listened to music, and I just took a lot of pictures. And I ate an ice cream cone because ice cream makes everything better. I ended up staying there until the sun set, and I took a couple pictures of it. And this picture reminded me, and when I was watching the sunset, it reminded me of a song by 10th Avenue North called Healing Begins. And I was just going to read some of the lyrics from that song. This is where the healing begins. This is where the healing starts. When you come to where you're broken within, the light meets the dark. Sparks will fly as grace collides with the dark inside of us. So please don't fight this coming light. As I sat and watched the sunset and watched the colors fade, I really started thinking of this song, and I really did feel like healing had begun and that light had met the darkness that was inside of me. And for the first time in a long time, I was at peace. While I was there, I also reflected on 2 of my favorite Bible verses about peace. The first one is Philippians 4, 6-7. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Jesus Christ. And then John 16:33. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. In the moments where I'm overwhelmed, I think of this experience and remember the peace that has been promised to us. Now, there really is a time for hate. And for me, that time was 7:15 to 7:30 a.m. every morning I was on duty. You see, worship began at 7:20 a.m. and breakfast was at 7:30 a.m. But the students were a little bit picky about their toast, and their toast could only be one temperature, and that temperature was hot. But see, if I went and made the toast before worship at 7:15, it would get too cold and they wouldn't eat it, and it would go to waste. But if I waited until 7:30 to make their toast, then they would get mad at me because I couldn't make it quickly enough. For the entire year, I never solved this problem. So for the entire year, I hated making toast. But that was really the only thing I hated with such a passion. A time to plant and a time to uproot. Leaving the United States was really difficult. I knew that my relationships were going to change, and I felt like I was putting my life here on hold while everyone else was moving on. But then I was also moving on, but almost in a different way. And moving to a different country is pretty scary when you only know 2 people that you Skyped once, and you just know someone's going to be at the airport waiting for you. I also only took $100 in cash. My parents and I had just gotten home from a wedding about a day and a half before I left, and I was busy packing, and that was the one thing that I forgot was more than $100 in cash. So the key takeaway is take more than $100 when you travel to a country to live there for a year or longer. But thankfully, because I forgot to bring it, the people there in New Zealand were really kind. They ended up covering me on some stuff the first couple weeks I was there until I got paid. So I kind of had to get to know people, so I had to ask for money. It was kind of embarrassing. But they were really kind about it, and I was able to pay them back. But throughout the year, I made a lot of really cool connections and met a lot of people, and it was a great year. But by the end of the year, the thought of uprooting yet again was just totally heartbreaking. I didn't want to leave the students that I'd come to love or the community. It seemed like yet again I was moving into the unknown. I knew friendships had changed, and I knew I was walking away from people that I loved, and I didn't know if I would ever see again. It was rough, I'm not going to lie to you. This summer I've had to do a lot of replanting and tending to roots that were left behind. Uprooting and planting can be some of the most difficult times in our life. However, I would not change anything about this last year or the difficulties that came with moving to another country. Now, I've mentioned a lot of times that were difficult for me. The word terrible has been mentioned several times, and you're probably wondering why I even enjoyed my time there. Well, I have yet to talk about love. The love and the appreciation I felt in New Zealand is what got me through these other times and made the experiences absolutely amazing. And a lot of the love I saw was in the little things. One of the first days I was working by myself last August, I was just sitting in the dean's office, and a couple of the girls had come in and were talking with me, and they asked me what my favorite flower was, and I said a daffodil, not thinking much of it. And so they left. We kind of finished our conversation. And about 20 to 30 minutes later, they came back with this big bunch of daffodils. And I had thought nothing of it because here in the States, daffodils don't bloom until February. But since the seasons are opposite, daffodils bloom in August. So the girls had gone out and picked the daffodils for me, and it absolutely made my day. One of the other times that I remember well is one of the first nights I did room check by myself. I walked into one of the rooms and 2 girls shared it. And I was just saying goodnight, and it was kind of like one of those moments when you're on the phone to your friend, and you say, goodbye, I love you, and you hang up, and you're like, ooh, didn't mean to say that I love you part, it's a little awkward. And so I said that, I said I love you, and it's not that I didn't mean it, I just didn't mean to say it, and I thought, oh no, I've played my cards too soon, they're gonna think I'm some like melty little human that just says I love you all the time. And I was kind of embarrassed, but like 2 seconds later, both of the girls were like, "Aw, miss, we love you too." And and my heart just completely melted all over the floor, and that's still one of my favorite memories. The hair was just amazing. But it was really the last week that I was there that I felt more love and appreciation than I've ever felt in my entire life. It kind of started out with my birthday, because it was right about a week before I left, and the boarding school, they actually had gotten me a cake, and they surprised me with it, and they all sang me happy birthday, so that was awesome. And then I ended up going out to dinner with some of my friends, and that night we played some games and everything, so it was just an awesome birthday. And then throughout that last week, a bunch of people took me out to dinner to say goodbye, and there was a staff lunch that they had, and the staff gave me a going away gift, but then they started to say the little things that they had appreciated over that year. And it was really overwhelming because these staff members were mentioning things that I didn't even realize had made a difference for them. And it was really so kind hearing all of those words from them. But it was really the last night I was there. I actually didn't really do my job. I didn't take the girls to study. I didn't take them to dinner. And I didn't take them to worship. But we had a great time. We watched a movie, my favorite one, Tangled. And we ate popcorn and candy, and then we took some pictures. Actually, you can't even see me in this picture. I think I'm way in the back by the whiteboard. That's kind of awkward, whatever. So we took some pictures with some of the girls, and we shared memories, and they made me a book, actually, of each girl wrote in the book something to me, like a letter. And it was when I didn't read it that night. I knew I wouldn't leave if I read that book. I would start crying immediately. So I read it when I got home. But there were a lot of memories shared of all the silly things I'd done and said. There was a lot of laughter. There was a lot of tears. There were a lot of hugs as well. And then it ended up being the longest room check in history because I went and talked to each girl for about 20 minutes. And I didn't get back to my flat or my apartment until about 1 a.m. And normally I finish room check at about 10:30 or 11, so a little bit longer than normal. I didn't sleep that night because I had to leave at 5:30 in the morning, and I didn't think I would be able to sleep anyway. Mr. Henry, he was one of the boys' deans. He ended up taking me to the airport the next morning, or that morning. And I actually drove because I wanted to drive on the left side of the road one last time. And then 10 of my friends actually ended up coming to the airport with me. A bunch of these people were in the youth group with me and ended up being some of my best friends while I was there. And so they ended up coming, and I didn't know, I knew a couple of them might, but I didn't know this many. And so I was just really overwhelmed with the kindness that they would come to the airport at 6:15. It was almost too kind. And I didn't really say much to them. I was so overwhelmed and just exhausted. But I gave them each a hug before I left, and as I handed my ticket to the lady, I just started crying. And I walked out the doors, and there's actually a big window, so I could have looked back, and apparently they were all waving at me, but I knew if I looked back, I wouldn't have been able to get on that airplane. I cried pretty much all the way back to Auckland, and then from Auckland to LA, I was just in a daze. The last few days that I was there were amazing, and they were heartbreaking, all at once. The love and the appreciation I felt in New Zealand was overwhelming, and it has been the best experience and the best season in my life this far. Ecclesiastes 3:1 mentions how there is a season for every activity under the sun. Seasons are great, but they were messed up in New Zealand. Sorry, but winter in July, Christmas in the summer, is just not right. It was actually really interesting experiencing the opposite seasons. Unfortunately, having these opposite seasons meant that I missed out on apple season here. Thankfully, though, my parents sent me apple donuts. They figured that out. I might not have survived if they hadn't done that, though. Seasons in our lives can be really interesting as well, and they remind me of chapters in a book. Sometimes it's a page turner, and you never want it to end. Other times, you want nothing more than for that chapter to be finished. Some chapters are easy to get through, and others you have to will yourself to get to the end. Sometimes the chapters make you laugh, and sometimes they make you cry. But each chapter is part of the most fantastic story there is. The story of a God who loved, who saved, and is coming back to take us home. This sounds like such a simple story, but at times it can be really complicated. These past few years and the experiences I had in New Zealand have showed how much of a struggle life can be, and just how messy our relationship can be with God as well. It can actually look a lot like the seasons. It can look like spring. There's a lot of new growth. There's a little bit of rain. There's a little bit of sunshine as well. Or it can be like summer. Things are pretty comfortable. It's warm. There's lots of sunshine. Things are good. Or it can be like fall. Something seems just a bit off. There's a chill in the air, and the weather is unstable. Or it can be like winter. It's cold and cloudy. Where is the sun? Where is the happiness and the warmth? Where is the sun? God, where is your sun? And where are you? Unfortunately, winter can feel like it lasts forever. It seems like the rain will never end and the sun will never return. It seems like there is no hope. But there is. Spring eventually comes again. You see, everything is made beautiful in its time. In time, the rain will pass. In time, the sun will return. In time. In New Zealand, I wasn't sure if my best was good enough. I didn't know if I had made a difference or if my time had gone to waste. But in the last few days, I realized that things had been made beautiful in 10 months' time. Ecclesiastes 3 gives us this hope. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. I know there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all of their toil. This is the gift of God. 19, 20, 21. The years of my life that hold some of the most significant seasons I will ever experience. 19, 20, 21. The years where I might not have seen it in the moment, but upon reflection, I have seen how God's hand has guided me on a life-changing adventure. So I have shared a few of my experiences with you, but I also wanted to show you the beautiful landscapes of New Zealand and convince you that you all need to visit. So picture me snowboarding on one of the mountains there. It was a single mountain, actually it was a volcano at first. And it was interesting because I'm used to snowboarding in the Sierra Nevada mountain range, so normally you can't see down, but you could almost see everywhere, almost the entire country. It was really beautiful. This was on my adventures to Australia. This is a wallaby. It's like a little mini kangaroo. And he was pretty cute. I got to feed him and pet him as well. This is Hobbiton. I've never wanted to be shorter in my life, except for when I was there so I could live in the little houses. It was awesome. This is part of the lake from Queenstown. It's the city is actually it would kind of be behind us to the left if you were standing and looking in this direction. But Queenstown is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been in my entire life, and the city is just right on the lake, and it's just surrounded by these mountain ranges. My mom came to visit, and we ended up going to the Fjordlands, which are on the south part of the South Island, and it's just all these fjords, but this is on the way there, and it's just some amazing scenery there that I have never seen anywhere else. And then this is the Milford Sound. This is one picture, I have one more picture left. So there's this, and so you could go on these cruises all through these different, through these crevices almost. And this is one of my favorite pictures because the sun is just shining on that little boat. But Milford Sound is absolutely beautiful. It felt like I was in another world. It was just so mystical and so magical. And New Zealand is just an amazing country. And I will always cherish the memories that I have from this past year. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you so much for the opportunity that you gave me to travel to a different country. And I also pray for the student missionaries that are out there right now serving you. And God, I just ask you to come close to them in their times of trouble. And Lord, I just want to thank you for giving us seasons in our lives. And I thank you for coming close to us in those seasons as well. It can be difficult, Lord, but we know that everything is made beautiful in its time. Lord, I ask you to just please be with us today, come into our hearts, and just keep us safe, and just help us to have a fantastic rest of your Sabbath day. In your name I pray. Amen.